Welcome to Marin Voices and Views. With Lawrence A. Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. This is the final episode of our three-part series covering the three races for county supervisor on the June ballot. If you missed our shows covering the candidates from Southern Marin and the Ross Valley, you can find them on our website at marinvoicesandviews.com. Today we meet the candidates for District 4, which has been represented for many years by Steve Kinsey. District 4 is Marin's geographically largest and most sprawling district, including parts of Novato, Larkspur, Corte Madera, and all of West Marin. This open seat has drawn 8 candidates, and in order to meet them all, we're expanding our show to an hour. In this first half hour, we will talk with 4 of the candidates. Dominic Grassi, Thomas Castigliones, Dennis Rodoni, and Brian Staley. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you.
Dominic Grassi is a fourth-generation Marin resident, a dairy farmer, and a small business owner. He has served on the board of the Marin Agricultural Land Trust and has been president of the Marin County Farm Bureau and the Marin-Sonoma Fair. He's married, has 2 kids, and lives in Novato. In a minute, Dominic, tell us why you're the right person to replace Steve Kinsey.
Well, I believe that my roots, my deep history, my family roots here in Marin County show people that this community is extremely important to me. And I don't think anyone else can say that about how much they've been here and how important it is. And I want to continue to protect West Marin and what we have out here. The beautiful landscapes that we have are extremely important.
Okay. And next, we have to turn the page here. Thomas Castigliones is a first-generation American-Lithuanian and a longtime military and disaster responder. Thomas offers a fresh perspective with his unique and varied background. He started his first restaurant at 12, ran a $1 million restaurant at 19, and managed a $150 million a year security operation by age 26. Now 40, Thomas is running to bring his leadership and get-it-done attitude to the Board of Supervisors. And in full disclosure, he wrote the introduction. Thomas, thanks for being with us. And in a minute, what's your case for replacing Supervisor Kinsey?
Well, I've spent the last 8 years honing a set of skills when getting placed into a disaster environment that you have to diplomatically navigate a very strenuous and consequence environment. That set of skills, I believe, will serve the County of Marin and the citizens in trying to find solutions to very complex issues. We have very varying points of view, and everybody's energized, and that's very much the environment that I've operated in, especially over the last 8 years. And it's not just exclusive to the Region 9, which is 3 CONUS states and a state in the Pacific and the territories, but also in the East Coast, in the Midwest. And so I've come to know how to come into a community that's new, that I've never been to before, gain their trust very quickly, and then work with them to find solutions. I think I can do that as Marin County Supervisor.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dennis Rodoni. Dennis is a contractor from Olema. He's served on the North Marin Water District Board for 20 years. He's been on a range of boards and commissions, including the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and Point Reyes National Seashore Association. Easy for me to say. A Marin native and former teacher, he's married with 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Look younger than that. And back in 2004, Dennis ran against Mr. Kinsey and got 36% of the vote. Dennis, why are you the guy to replace Steve Kinsey?
Well, I think if experience matters in this race, because it's a very complicated job to be 4th District Supervisor because of the sprawling nature of the district. Just understanding the district and understanding its constituents is important, and I've done that. I've already done that. I understand the district. I know where every little street is, and I know where every constituent is. And I think it's important that we have a strong presence. 4th District has a strong presence like we've had for the past 2 supervisors on the Board of Supervisors to give us good representation. Because it is such a diverse district, it needs strong representation. And I can bring, my background brings additional diversity in health care and the environment, working with seniors, et cetera. So,
thank you. And finally on this panel, Brian Staley, who lives in Woodacre and is married. He grew up in San Anselmo, graduated from Sir Francis Drake High School. He's been a planner, designer, builder for 30 years in Marin County. His areas of expertise are envelope efficiency and sustainable design. He's the current chair of the San Geronimo Valley Planning Group. Brian, what is your case to be the person to replace Supervisor Kinsey?
In that 30 years that you mentioned that I've been in the building industry and planning industry, I've had an opportunity to review nearly every regulation and policy that governs the activities within the confines of our district. In that time, and in particular, specifically recently, there have been a number of changes. Most recently, there are really dramatic changes having to do with new policies and new regulations coming from the state. I think my set of skills and my understanding of those regulations will allow me to continue the legacy that Gary Giacomini started some 24 years ago and be able to be a very effective supervisor.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let's talk about some of the issues. And of course, in Marin, one of the big issues is housing. Countywide, renters are being squeezed out, rent increases are going through the roof, and inventory is down near zero. But there's thousands of seniors, there's single parents, young families, they're facing anxiety wanting to live here in Marin with their families, raise their kids, and use our schools. In West Marin, from what we hear, and I think what's been reported, short-term rentals are taking up a lot of the inventory and further squeezing people out of the market. What's the right approach, Dominic?
Well, with regards to West Marin specifically, for example, in Marshall, about 80% right now of those houses are unoccupied and they're being rented out short term. And so I think we have to start looking at the idea of putting caps on the number of days that you can lease those houses out on Airbnb, for example. Hopefully that will start to incentivize people to want to stay in those homes a little bit more often. The other thing we could do is look at our transient occupancy tax. It's right now 10% for the county. And I think if we jack that up a little bit more, people might not be willing to spend quite so much money to go and stay out there. So plus any of that money that comes in should go directly into those smaller communities out there in West Marin.
Thomas?
Well, it's a complex issue. People commonly will mention that we probably need to look at access for more property or trying to build our way out of it, and I don't think that's necessarily an acceptable approach. There are other factors in terms of taxation, how expensive it actually is to own a home and operate a home. When it comes to the short term, I actually agree with Dominic that the occupancy tax needs to be looked at, especially if someone isn't using long-term rentals and they are actually using it for short-term profitability. I met somebody the other day that was getting $14,000 a week out of their residence. That pretty much takes care of a mortgage for a good period of time when they can spend $200 and stay at the hotel down the street. So when you look at that disparity of income in that area, you're going to have to look at how you can impress upon them that that's not a practice that the community supports. And there are several different ways I think we can do that, and we'd have to explore really what has worked nationally.
Dennis?
So I'm totally in sync with the new strategy of the Board of Supervisors, which is buying infill homes and making sure they stay affordable, working on the second unit ordinance to make sure it works and is for affordable housing, because that policy has never worked, and we need to revisit that and make sure it works for affordable housing. Very much in favor of junior accessory units where you can convert a bedroom into your house to a rental. That's what's going to keep seniors in our county and making it affordable for them to stay here by being able to rent a bedroom out without any regulation. And there's no impact in the neighborhood because it's an existing bedroom. The other thing that I'm in favor of is every development we have in Marin has to have multi-income levels in it, all kinds of levels, from workforce to affordable to market rate. And unless we have that balance, we have to start over and work out a new plan. But I'm in sync with the county's new plan on housing. I think it's a good step. Marin is a small county, and we can't do things in big ways. We've proven that over and over and over again. The most recent proof has been Windcup, where it's a huge development, big impact, and we ended up with 10% affordable housing. That's not acceptable.
Brian?
It's, as mentioned, a very complex issue. The county just completed a series of hearings where the supervisors, essentially along with staff, made a determination that they wouldn't be doing anything that directly impacts the property owners themselves. So they weren't going to do anything that held the rent rates at a particular rate or anything like that. What the county has decided their primary goal is going to be is to acquire existing affordable units and basically hold the ground as best they can. So far, they've been somewhat successful. They acquired 37 units in Point Reyes. They've acquired a trailer park in Forest Knolls. They've also purchased property in Fairfax. But the problem is that they're really not effectively adding any new aggregate housing. In 2015, there were no new aggregate housing added, and that's an unfortunate circumstance. Luckily, the county does have a policy that requires a minimum of 20% of any new developments be affordable, and I think there are a variety of opportunities that we have, including the George Lucas proposal out at Grady Ranch, that we need to look at.
Next, I'd like to ask you to comment on traffic and offer us some solutions or suggestions. Everybody knows this is a very serious problem in Marin. People lose lots of valuable time and get very aggravated. And it's not just the 101 freeway. So please offer at least 3 concrete proposals to ease congestion in Marin, especially in District 4. And Thomas, we'll start with you on this.
Well, thanks. I think I'm the only existing commuter. I have since 2002 commuted to South San Francisco and now Vanpool to Oakland. And so on a daily basis, I see that, as well as my wife, Kim, who is a small business owner, spends pretty much her life in her vehicle having to drive the 101 corridor. You know, some of the solutions that didn't get implemented is we built all these on-ramps with a great metering, but never turned them on. And in the East Bay, you can see it's a very effective strategy. We also have to tie some systems together. I heard recently that 2 of the busing systems are going to separate, further distancing the coordination of timing that were permitted. And I'd also look at new technology, and I've kind of disclosed this on my website, but where are really the carpooling apps? And I know that there are some new startups in San Francisco that are looking at for schooling and to work with trusted parents, but we have to look at those types of strategies and bring them and nurture those kinds of companies within Marin. I can do that.
All right. Dennis Rodoni?
Thank you. So I might have a couple extra suggestions, but first of all, I want to open up the 3rd lane on the Richmond Bridge. It's very important. Secondly, I want to add a lane on Highway 37 along with raise it up because of sea level rise. We've got to do it. Thirdly, I want to expand the transit system and make it function and work better. We need to interconnect with our train now. We have no interconnection with our train, and unless we do that, the SMART project will not be successful. So those are main and important things. The other thing, locally in West Marin, we have visitor traffic issues out there, and we need to locally as a village come to grips with those and figure out how we want to deal with those traffic issues in West Marin. It's actually a fire and safety and emergency issue that we're facing. So.
Now, in reference to the bridge, the Richmond Bridge, and Highway 37, those clearly get into state-level issues. What can the county do to press for the resolutions that you propose?
You're exactly right. First of all, we need to be so supportive of them as a county. We have to work with our state representation, Mike McGuire and Mr. Levine, to make sure they're on board with it. And thirdly, I think the Board of Supervisors need to combine and go to Sacramento as a group and not leave there until we get some satisfaction.
Brian Staley?
Well, I'll agree with many of the points that Dennis just made, and I'll add that we have a couple of unique circumstances in Marin County. One, as had been mentioned, is that we have tourist traffic in the western part of the district, and that's rather different than the other kinds of traffic. We also have a problem in Marin that some other communities in the state also enjoy, and that is the traffic in the afternoon and in the mornings of parents bringing their kids to school. And unfortunately, that also has a tendency to fill our local streets. So since that particular issue has not been addressed, one of the things is the perception that I think we need to work with parents, that safety is not as tenuous or as really an issue, as severe an issue as many people consider. One of the reasons that parents drive their children to school is because they think that there is a danger to their child. I believe there really isn't that severe of a danger, and if we can only get that information to the parents and figure out effective ways for them allow their children to be able to go to school themselves.
I think there is a pilot bus plan now that's in effect in Mill Valley,
That's what I'm gonna.
needs to be expanded in my personal opinion.
Absolutely.
Also, on
You're
behalf
stealing
of
my
students,
thunder.
I would
Sorry
argue,
about that too.
I would argue for staggered start times at school. I know the students would go along with that.
Yeah, it's tough to answer this question forth because so many of the ideas are already out there. So of course, I think working with Mark Levine, to get the third lane open on the Richmond Bridge is important, and we do need to support that entire process and get it open as quickly as possible. We need to also work the Sir Francis Drake corridor and try to get that opened up a little bit more, all the way over to I-580. So I think that will speed things up, move it along quicker. I'm going to disagree with Brian, though, about parents and their concerns with safety. And that's talking with people out in Nacashiland or Tamales. They would love to see their kids riding, but the bike lanes are not there on some of those back roads in West Marin, and it is still dangerous. And I've had several people actually flat out ask me, if you get elected, will you work on bike lanes in those areas so kids can ride to school? There are actually people out there who don't even like going out getting their mail in certain places just because those roads are very narrow and very dangerous. The pilot bus program that you just mentioned, the yellow school bus program, I think is very important that we expand it. Right now, traffic in Marin, 20% of it basically comes from parents taking their kids to school. So the pilot program going on Mill Valley is a step in the right direction to see how good it's going to be. But I think it's extremely important to continue that moving forward, especially up in areas like Corte Madera. And I'll throw one other quick one. Tomas mentioned the apps, and I'm a big fan of that as well. We need to build a relationship with Sonoma County. They increased their population by 25,000 people between the last two censuses. We only did 5,000. We have more people coming from Sonoma than anywhere. We need to work with them, find better places to get them off of our roads.
Well, the traffic problems and the housing problems are not going away all that quick. And they really seem to be in conflict with Marin's long-term growth plan, which is along the 101 corridor. How do we get people to agree that we're going to move forward on these issues? People along the corridor don't want any development. Wind Cup was, Exhibit A to everybody who's against anything. And people want to protect West Marin and the pristine areas that are out there. So what's your big picture, or what's your vision of Marin and its growth, Dennis? Let's start with you.
Thank you. Well, I think first of all, we have to remember that we're all here because of the beauty of Marin, the open space, the parks that we all enjoy. The ranching in West Marin is an important element of that. And so we have to prioritize what we're doing. And I think the general plan does a pretty good job of setting up the corridors, so we've prioritized that. And I agree with that approach. I think prioritizing the corridors so that we save West Marin and the ranching and protect it, and that's an important element of that general plan. Having said that, we have challenges because of affordable housing and workforce housing are the main two challenges. And so we need to work within the corridor and figure out places that we can do infill, places that we can do more second units, places that we can do junior accessory units. I don't like repeating it, but they're really important elements. They're small incremental steps, but if we don't do anything, it's much worse.
All these refugees from San Francisco who are buying these billion-dollar houses in southern Marin are saying, what, there's dairy farms in Marin? What's that all about? What do we do?
Brian, you're
up.
Well,
where
I'm not a dairy farmer.
No, I understand that.
But it is a complex issue, and as you mentioned, the favorite whipping boy of everyone is Wind Cup.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, the circumstance around Wind Cup was that it was only 10% affordable, and the reason that is that the Corte Madera has a different policy than the county of Marin, which is obviously the jurisdiction that we would have responsibility for. Marin County requires 20%. So first thing there is when you see concentration and development along the corridor, a lot of times those are incorporated districts and are up to the local town councils. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention that is a concern is one of the more recent regulations that I was talking about is the new local coastal program, and it actually allows for a fairly substantial amount of new development to take place out along the coastal areas. That'll be decided over the next few months at the Coastal Commission, and it'll be interesting to see how that hashes out. But that is an area that I do have, and the environmental community has a great deal of concern about.
So it's interesting to me. I've heard Brian mention he didn't mention the number today, 1.5 million square feet that could be developed out in West Marin, which is a heck of a lot less than what could be developed out there right now. The new local coastal plan is going to actually put stipulations and restrict what could be done. If somebody wants to go through a master plan, they could go through that process and develop up to 5% of their land. Okay, that's a heck of a lot more than 1.5 million total square footage. What we've done is put restrictions on what we can do, but we've created new ideas. For example, intergenerational housing on ranches, which I think is extremely important for ranchers' children to be able to grow up and live on their own ranches. And the next thing I think we actually need to do is start to be a little bit less discriminatory over our ranches. And we all want to continue to protect West Marin, but we currently don't even allow second units on those ranches. What about school teachers that are up in Tamales and they're commuting from Santa Rosa? I think it'd be great if they had the opportunity to live in a small little home somewhere close by to where they work. And that would open a number of ranches up out there that could put a second unit on it. It would be small, not invasive, not going to change the landscape, but it would be a step in the right direction.
So you think the folks in West Marin have the stomach for a little bit more growth out there?
Most of them probably don't, but you have to understand within the envelope of where you can build on a ranch, if you put another 750 square foot unit, no one's even going to notice it. Now, they will complain about it when it comes across the county's website, but you're not even going to notice it on most of those ranches.
Well, and I know that in speaking with several people, there's a big housing deficiency, especially in West Marin, for the workers on the ranches and on the milking facilities. And so, you know, I think that there are innovative ways for larger businesses, people that are actually employing a lot of business, and finding ways to being able to combine with. I was talking to Dr. Peters at MCF, and he says, you know, there are some examples where we're putting together buildings that don't just build homes, but they build community centers, they build community engagement areas. There's schooling that's involved in that. And so when you're looking at a more collaborative project than simply just building homes, I think the community could accept something like that. Also, when I deployed into the Gulf and saw some of the post-Katrina rebuilding, they were building modern, beautiful, environmentally neutral homes. Where are those projects? I'd love to see examples like that, and I know that the community would support if they were brought in early. And so, you know, as an emergency manager, we have to bring in people with varying points of view. They also have, you know, a biased opinion, and being able to bring those people together for those types of shared projects that the community can support is something that I want to do as county supervisor.
Great. As you well know, sprawling District 4 is pretty challenging to represent. And the interests of Corte Madera, for example, differ from the concerns of Novato and the coastal communities. So how do you plan to represent all the people in the district, and would you like to put in for a helicopter? Brian, let's start with you.
Thank you very much. I would love a helicopter. If you could make that happen, I have a place to park it in my yard. Honestly, the only way to really understand the district is to get out in it. One of the areas that you didn't mention in your opening is the Canal District. Mm-hmm. The District 4 was gerrymandered quite some time ago, and it is a very unusual shape, but the goal in the gerrymandering was to try and get roughly 50,000 human beings and has somewhere in the neighborhood of 22,000 voting adults. So given the diversity, given the uniqueness, given the fact that we're talking about Novato all the way to Homestead Valley and Mill Valley and parts of the urban corridor, you really have to get into those individual communities. You have to understand the needs of those individual communities, and I've spent a fair amount of time doing that over the last few months.
All right. Dominic?
Yeah, I really believe this is about building relationships with each and every one of those communities. You can't sit in your office at the Civic Center and expect to get things done. Brian's right. You got to get out there, walk the streets, meet the people, talk to the people who run the Canal Welcome Center and the Canal Alliance, and you got to get out into Point Reyes and talk with the different organizations out there, whether they're environmental and with MCL or the Sierra Club. But you have to build those relationships and let them know that you are accessible 24/7. I really think that's what I've done really well in my past when I was president of Farm Bureau, is to reach out into the environmental community and build those relationships. We didn't have a relationship 20 years ago, and over the past 10 years we've built that, and we've worked on a lot of these issues together. So that's something that's extremely important. You have to be accessible and let people know you want to work with them. And because I really don't think it's my job as a supervisor to come in and dictate what happens in the canal. It's to work with those people that are most closely connected to it and living in it every day, find out what they need and try to help.
Thomas Castellanos?
Well, I'm unlike my colleagues here. I grew up in Southern California, a small town in Tustin, and it used to be a small orange grove, and we used to walk through there getting to the farmer's market. And then I spent almost a decade in the Central Coast, and then moved up here in 2001. And so I'm kind of a transient Californian, and that really is emblematic of what really West Marin or District 4 really looks like, is that they've got these pockets that are their own unique environments and community. And couple that with my disaster experience, I go into these communities not knowing much of their background. And I have to go in with an open mind and open heart, hear what they have to say, tell me what their problems are, get to the root cause analysis, understand what the community is willing to support, and then help them get there. That's the role of the Marin County Supervisor, especially in District 4. And when you talk about, I know Brian did bring up the area in and around Bay Point and the Cove up there. There's some major issues that people were very, very open about disclosing how those issues are, and I understand that. I understand how to be able to come in and listen to that and then try to find and help solutions.
Dennis Rodoni.
You start with an electric car because you're going to be putting a lot of miles on when you're supervisor. But open and transparent government is what I bring to the office, including an open door where anyone can walk into my supervisor's office door, from union members to employees. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be having regular office hours in every corner of our district, where people will know when I'm going to be there, and they can come and have a cup of coffee with me, and they can tell me what's going on in their community and what are their needs, what do I need to address. And also I'm going to depend on those city councils that we're fortunate to have in place. Corte Madera has a city council. This whole town of Corte Madera, the one thing in our district that makes sense, the whole city is actually in the district, and we have a city council there that represents us well. And I'm happy to say that I have 3 of the 5 city council members endorsing me in this race.
Well, we're getting there towards the end of our show, and what we'd like to do is hear from each of you. If you're elected, what's your number 1 priority and specific goal that you promised the voters that you're going to really try to achieve? Dominic, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's necessarily one goal, but it's to leave Marin in a better place for my children and grandchildren, to make sure that we are sustainable, to make sure that we haven't let our debt completely overwhelm us with our with regards to pensions. So we need to be fiscally responsible moving forward until we can get things more balanced, and making sure that as we do that, we can still take care of our pension benefits. Because the last thing we want to do is pull pensions, but we need to start setting aside money to make sure that our very valued employees of the county have good pensions, but we have to make sure that it's done sustainably. So some changes need to be made. We have to be transparent. We have to make sure everybody understands why we're doing the things we're doing. So I think those are kind of the 2 general consensus for me, is to be very open and transparent, and to make sure that we protect this place for the future fiscally.
Thanks. Tomas, how about you?
You know, I've worked more 100-hour work weeks than I care to admit, and I know what it means to put in a long day's work, and I still continue to do that. Just came back from 3.5 months of being deployed and finding, temporary and long-term shelter for 3,000 people that were impacted by the fires in Lake and Calaveras counties. And I want to bring that experience to Marin County so that they can not only feel comfortable in my solutions. I'm very accessible in terms of social media, if that's what they use, and I use my own accounts for the campaign because I have long-standing relationships with people throughout my time here. I want to use my business acumen to come in and look at the financials. I think that there is space and opportunity to be able to make more available the funds that are in the budget for uses like projects and trying to look at busing strategies, like looking at comprehensive affordable housing units and what the county can actually provide and support, making investments in transportation and cutting those down. What are we really going to do when the train comes online, and are we going to tie our systems together? Those are complicated issues, and that freedom of movement is very important to Marin.
One of my main goals of being a supervisor is to bring the stakeholders together to make sure that we all work together. And I'm one of the few candidates, I think, that has a relationship with the ranching community, the environmental community, all the villages in West Marin, that I think I can meet that goal because I'm welcome in all those camps. And I think that's an important element of this job as being District 4 Supervisor. It is so diverse, it's so difficult, that someone that can work within the district and knows all the elements of the district and knows all the groups that they have to work with is really important. I'm pleased to say this week the Sierra Club endorsed me. That's a big endorsement, but I also understand that I'm representing the ranchers just as much as the Sierra Club. And that's the important message that I want to bring to the Board of Supervisors if I'm elected, if I'm lucky enough to be elected. Thank you.
I think Gary Giacomini has created a legacy, and it's very important that we follow that legacy. One of his fundamental points that he always strove to achieve was to protect the character of our local communities. And in order to do that, you have to stay on top of all the new regulations that the state imposes on our communities. Right now we're in the process of dealing with a number of new regulations. One of the things the state has done very recently is determine that most of our ecosystems, our bodies of water, are impaired. This has a massive impact in the 4th District. It's things like this that I'm always on the top of and have been on the top of for 27 years in my involvement as the chair of the San Geronimo Valley Planning Group. I hope very much to be able to continue that kind of work and work collectively with the people who are burdened by these new regulations and be able to find answers for them and fixes for the problems.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you because you've been so concise with your answers, and none of you has been prepared for the bonus question that I'm going to ask you.
I also want to say that compared to the last cycle, these guys are in best behavior.
So let me ask you a minute each to address the homeless issues in San Rafael and what you believe the proper role of the county is in dealing specifically with Mayor Phillips' desire to relocate St. Anthony's Dining Room and Ritter Center. And let me start with you, Thomas.
I actually have a lot of personal history with homelessness, and for me it's a very personal issue. And I support the Marin Organizing Committee's initiative to also find a permanent home for rest. You know, I find it objectionable that we have kids that are homeless on the streets. I find it objectionable that veterans are not finding access to those services. I want to be able to invest in those programs to make sure that by the end of my first term, that there isn't a homeless child in Marin County and there's not a homeless veteran in Marin County. I'm very passionate about that. I think that the long-term solutions, I know that many communities are not supportive of finding those types of facilities near their homes, so we have to find a delicate balance of finding a permanent home, not only for rest, because I do believe that program needs to be expanded, but also supporting Ritter House and the invaluable services they provide. And I know that the Marin Community Clinic is hugely a proponent of ending homelessness because they see the bulk of those residents or non-residents in their facilities, and they want to see that end. And I think we've got partners that we can bring together to find that solution.
And REST is the program that's being run by individual churches throughout the county.
That's
on
right.
a basic ad hoc basis.
Yeah, every single night they rotate from congregation to congregation, and the stress on those volunteers is pretty large. And they are looking for some relief, and I think that we can do that.
Dennis?
We can't make the problem go away by moving it to some other location in the city. And I think for many regards, having the facilities that are available to the homeless and being accessible is really important. And so I think we need to be careful with how we make those decisions, because the unintended consequences sometimes of what we do is much greater than what we're trying to fix. And I think that's important. I think it's the job of the county, Human Health and Human Services, to take the lead on this. They think they have, but they need help, and we need to pass Laura's Law. There's no question in my mind that the county should have passed it originally, and I understand it may come back in January. I hope I have an opportunity to vote for Laura's Law in January, because I think it's one of the tools that we need to have, and I think we need to do everything that we can do to provide housing, to provide health care, to take care of all of our homeless people. It's just not going away, it's getting worse, and if you're on the streets of San Rafael or you're on the streets of Bolinas, you see it every day. And it's not going to go away unless we start addressing it.
Brian?
I graduated in high school in 1981. Almost immediately after I graduated high school, we saw a very consistent and ongoing reduction in federal funding for people that were homeless, that had mental difficulties. The facilities that were maintained by the federal government were almost entirely closed. So the result was that the burden and the responsibility of dealing with these individuals went entirely to the county and the state. Unfortunately, the state and the county don't have the wherewithal and the financial ability to be able to continue the programs that had been ongoing previously. And so now we are left with an enormous group of individuals all throughout the county and all throughout the state that tend to concentrate in the urban areas. The question is what to do about it. I agree with Dennis that one of those is Laura's Laws. Now Laura's Law, that deals almost entirely with people with mental issues. So the question then is, for those that do not have psychological issues, how do you get them into housing? And we need to look at the options and more aggressively fund those programs.
And finally, Dominic?
Yeah, and I agree with most of how that was said. We really need to look at our mental health status, because so many of the people that are homeless right now have mental health issues. And if we could just fix those, once they start standing on their feet, then they're going to find places to live. They're going to find jobs. And so creating jobs locally will help. And I think all of these factors need to be taken into place. You know, Tomas mentioned the REST program, and that's really a great program, but it is stressful, and we need to continue to elaborate on it. But we also need to make sure that the county, and I think it's their job, to step in and lead the way on this and to work with, you know, San Rafael, for example, and the mayor. And I understand why the mayor wants to move it to get the homeless people out of downtown, because it doesn't work really well. But we got to put them somewhere. So Dennis is right when he gets to that. Just moving them can have unintended consequences. And so I really think it's up to us as the county to step in, work with the city councils, and find out exactly where the best place is, where they can get close help, both mentally and find jobs close by.
Dominic Grassi, Thomas Castigliones, I'm working on that, Castigliones, Dennis Rodoni, and Brian Staley. We're very impressed. Thank you for running for office, and thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks for having us.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Our District 4 forum continues with 3 more candidates for supervisor. By the way, no ranking of the candidates is implied. We taped 2 different segments 8 days apart to accommodate the busy schedules of the candidates. In this segment, we meet Alex Easton Brown, Wendy Callens, and Mary Tamburo. Welcome to each of you. There's one more candidate in the race for a total of 8 contenders. He is Al Dugan of Novato, who declined our invitation to be here today.
Alex Easton Brown is a sociologist and a 40-year resident of Lagunitas, where he lives with his wife, Diane, who is a teacher in Richmond. Alex is a past treasurer of Marin County Democratic Central Committee, past treasurer of the Marin United Taxpayer Association, and then you were its president. Alex was recently referred to in the Independent Journal as an only in Marin combination of a progressive and a tax watchdog.
That's right.
Alex, in about a minute, tell us why you're the guy who's going to replace Steve Kinsey.
Well, Kinsey's resigning, so it's no longer Steve. We have too much traffic, too much development. Our roads are crumbling. The supervisors spend millions of dollars on consultants. We have a pension liability, an unfunded liability of millions of dollars. And there's an attitude at Civic Center of lawlessness. I was driving here today and I saw these yard signs for a woman running for Judge Pantaloni. I think she's a district attorney. And the law says you can't put these up until the 23rd of the month. And here we are, 15th perhaps, 16th? 14th. Yeah, so she's ahead of the game here. Of course, you know, when you're a district attorney, you don't have to obey the law. Just make other people suffer for not.
Wendy Callens is an established local leader in environmental protection and transportation policy. She's the founder and program director of Safe Routes to Schools. And she also serves on the executive board of Sustainable Marin. She knows how to work effectively with diverse communities, bringing people together to find consensus and solve problems. Wendy, in a minute, please explain why you think you should replace Steve Kinsey.
Well, Steve Kinsey's shoes are big shoes to fill, but I want to follow in his footsteps. I think what Steve was best known for was really being able to listen to all sides and bring people together to find solutions. For the past 16 years, that's exactly what I've been doing with Safe Routes to Schools. I've worked all over the county, so with a sprawling district like this, I have familiarity with both East Marin and West Marin. And I've brought together the parents, the school district, the cities. We've sat down, we've looked at the problems that exist that create safety hazards for kids, and we've come up with solutions, and we've brought in over $30 million worth of improvements around the schools. That's the kind of work that I would do as a supervisor. I've been involved in politics one way or the other, either as a volunteer, as an advocate, as a journalist, and for the past 16 years as someone who is paid working for a government program. And so I know all aspects of the community and of government.
Finally, we meet Mary Tamburo of Homestead Valley. You're a singer, songwriter, known to your fans as Mary Mac. Mary announced her candidacy on Nextdoor and defined her platform as, "I'm not a politician. I will listen to you and I will not lie to you." Why you coming after Steve Kinsey?
Well, it's funny you should phrase it that way. It's interesting. I have never aspired to be in politics, but I've worked with the public for many years in a very pleasant way with music. And I've spent many volunteer hours the last 15 years donating my time and expertise in marketing and social media for nonprofits. I was a founding member of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of Social Enterprise Alliance. And I got involved in local politics because of a Safe Routes to School project that was forced on my neighbors in semi-rural Homestead Valley. Now we have an urban concrete sidewalk, and I tried to bring the community together, but the huge political forces and skipping CEQA, and it was quite a mess. And so now that the lobbyists have moved on, my neighbors are still dealing with the after effects of a poorly planned and executed project. So I'd like to get in there and get down to doing some safe and sustainable routes and see if we can't maybe work together after the election and make some positive change that makes sense for everybody instead of just a few people once the money's there.
Thank you.
And a little timer went off there.
I'm sorry, I just didn't let it buzz.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Countywide, renters are being squeezed out by huge rent increases and almost zero inventory. But thousands of seniors, single parents, and young families face housing anxiety. In West Marin, short-term rentals have forced out long-time renters. Alex Easton Brown, to you first. What's the right approach to deal with Marin's housing issues?
Well, the problem is the market, and we really can't do anything about the market. The demand is so great, pushing house prices up. People from China are coming and buying houses here, paying whatever for them. We can't really deal with that. There's nothing we can. What is affordable anyway? Affordable for who? For the very poor, for the working middle class. I feel Marin is built out. I don't want to see any more developments like Wind Cup in Corte Madera. I don't want to see a string of these running up and down the 101 corridor. I think it's unfortunate, but we need to hire Marin people for Marin County jobs, not bring people in from Sonoma or elsewhere. And to do that, let's get off this kick of hiring the best and the brightest. Government work is not rocket science. And we have a lot of talented people, young people, freshly graduated, and older people that have been laid off. Let's put them to work for Marin County. It'll save money, it'll cut the traffic problem back in the housing.
Wendy Callens on housing, please.
Yeah, I was a renter for many years before I bought one of the last cheap houses in Marin County. And so I really have been following this issue for 3 decades and been very concerned about it. The rents rising have been going on for a long time. And one of the big issues in West Marin is the short-term rentals. People are evicting long-term people and then bringing in short-term rentals. And it's decimating the community, so it's affecting everybody. There are regulations that you can put in place to control the use of vacation rentals. In Santa Cruz County, they actually have a cap on how many permits that they will allow. And I think these are the kind of things that we need to look at. And I also think we need to look at how we can stabilize rents in the county in a way that is fair for both the landlords and the tenants. And that's something we should have a long discussion about and see what we can do.
Mary Tamburo, you next, please, on housing.
Okay. Well, there are lots of creative solutions out there. I feel we do need to regulate Airbnb. I believe in a free market, but also believe in limits to greed. We can't really regulate greed. If someone really wants to make a killing in the real estate market, that's their right because we live in a free market society. But we do have Northern California Community Loan Fund. We can offer some low-cost loans to families so they can stay in their community. Today I read a report that rents in San Francisco, housing prices have gone down for the first time in many years. So maybe the market's starting to stabilize. It's something that we need to watch.
All right, thank you.
Wendy, traffic backups are just a daily headache for everyone here in Marin. And it's not just the 101 freeway. It's the surface streets, it's the connecting streets. Can you give us 3 concrete proposals to deal with traffic in Marin, particularly in District 4?
Particularly in District 4. Well, District 4 is everywhere. So
that's true. That's why we asked.
I am the one person in this race who has actually reduced traffic congestion. I have reduced traffic congestion around the schools through encouraging green modes of transportation, walking, biking, carpool, and bus. One of the first things we need to do is bring back yellow bus service. We did that in Tiburon Boulevard, Tiburon, and we were able to reduce traffic congestion considerably, noticeably. There'll be a pilot program in Mill Valley, possibly Kentfield, next year, and then what we want to do is look at finding the funding to bring it to the whole county. That will have an immediate effect. Some of the other things that we can do, there's operational things you can do, there's signal timing, there's roundabouts where you can have traffic moving more efficiently. We need to improve our transit system in many different ways. And one of the things I want to look at is ferry service to the East Bay and to Vallejo.
Mary, what are your thoughts?
Well, those are some good ideas. I did sign the petition for the school of the yellow bus service and wrote a few letters about that. Commuter traffic, as far as it goes with county employees, private companies are giving their employees some shuttles. Maybe that's something we could look into for county employees to reduce commuter traffic. And I would like to see neighborhood schools come back. So let's see what we can do so people don't have to drive and cross a freeway to take their kids to school or put them on a school bus. Just go to the source of the problem. And that seems to me.
Thank you. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Well, there's a mindless boosterism where we actually spend tax dollars trying to get tourists to come visit West Marin. And what we are left with is crowded roads. It only benefits a few businesses. So I'd stop that. I would shut down the Vista Point on the Golden Gate Bridge, except to people on foot. Because blocking the bridge, I was trying to get home from the airport the extra 2 hours in the bus, because not only the right lane was closed with buses and cars backed up, but the middle lane also. I was talking to Mr. Harf about the possibility of using eminent domain to close down the Muir Woods staging area, at least narrow it down, so we don't have these million visitors a year clogging the roads in Mill Valley. Also, I would meter the traffic in the evening going through Drake Avenue and onto 580. These are people doing the shortcut so they don't have to pay the toll and don't have to wait for the Bay Bridge to open up. I would meter them, and I'd open the Richmond Bridge, the third lane.
Thank you. So our unsolved problems with housing and traffic seem to be in conflict with Marin's long-term general plan, which is intended to maintain as much open space as possible by steering development to the 101 corridor. Now, most people agree on the open space part, but there's a lot of disagreement on the rest of it. What is your big picture vision for Marin and the existing general plan? Mary, you first, please.
Well, I haven't really thought about what my personal vision is. I would like to just take a look at the countywide plan and enforce it. I've seen instances where some of our county requirements, for example, the parts of the countywide plan say we want to protect the wetlands, but then the DPW's uniform design requirements insist that we put in concrete driveways, which is more of an impervious surface. So it's in direct conflict with one of the goals of our countywide plan, which is to protect the wetlands and reduce water pollution. So what I would see as far as my vision for Marin would be to remove some more of those impervious surfaces and replace them with permeable surfaces, which will create jobs and That's just one aspect. There's lots more work to do. We just haven't got there yet.
Thank you. Alex Easton Brown?
Well, Marin is built out. That's my feeling. There's no more room for any development. In West Marin, we have a problem with the proposed coastal plan because they want to do generational housing on the ranches. This would triple the population of the ranches, would triple the traffic. Also, they want to do cheese factories, they want to do bed and breakfast, they want to do wine tasting. Pretty soon, the ranches are going to look like the Jersey coast if we don't stop this new coastal plan from going through, and hopefully the Coastal Commission will step in.
I'm from New Jersey.
I love
So am
Jersey.
I did tell you. I had to get that
I
in
love
there.
Jersey. I just don't want to hear it. It's too
You
beautiful.
better watch it.
All right, that's enough
You got
about
somebody
New
from New Jersey here.
Two people.
Wendy Callens.
Okay, well, the 1972 General Plan was a visionary document. It was the first of its kind that actually created urban growth boundaries. And it protected our beautiful heritage that makes Marin special. I have no desire to touch any of our open space, and I will do everything I can to protect it. It also, yes, directed new growth into the city-centered corridor. That was a part of the general plan that didn't happen. A lot of people talk about the massive development that's taken place, but if you actually look at the number of housing units that has gone in, there's been far more commercial development than there has been housing. And 68,000 people commute into Marin County every day, over 5,000 from the East Bay, 15,000 from Sonoma County. And there is room, there is not a lot of room. We have to be very strategic about what we do and what it looks like. I know everyone says we're going to put wind cups up and down 101. Nobody wants to do that. And if you look at truly the kind of affordable housing units that have been built in the last few years, you won't see them because they blend right in. There's a lot of things we can do, but my time is up.
Thank you.
And we'll move on from there.
Well, let's talk a little bit about District 4, which is very challenging to represent. Not only does it have the sprawling interest in the west part of the county, but it includes Corte Madera, parts of Novato, and coastal communities. How do you represent the interests of all that diverse amount of people and diverse amount of geography? Alex, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I live in Lagunitas, which is sort of right in the middle of the district. I think that 2/3 of the district lives in the 101 corridor, Corte Madera, and then even out at Novato. I think the people living in the corridor have been underserved all this time. Since Giacomini was elected 44 years ago, and then Kinsey following him, the emphasis has always been West Marin, West Marin, West Marin. But the corridor has been underserved. And I would like to put more emphasis in quality of life for the people in the corridor, because in West Marin, quality of life is sort of a given.
Wendy.
Well, for one thing, I have been working in East Marin. I helped to open up the new Cove School and reduce traffic around there in Corte Madera. And I know Homestead Valley, and I know the canal because I've been doing projects in the canal. And of course, I know Novato because we've been doing safe routes up there. So I know the whole district. I live in West Marin. The thing about West Marin and Homestead Valley, I will include in that, is the county is the only government that they have. They don't have a city council. That's why West Marin gets special attention. In order to serve the whole district, what I want to do is develop an advisory council where I have representatives from each of the community who keeps me abreast of what's going on in their own community so that I can really know which meetings I need to go to, what issues are coming up, and how I can best serve them. And as far as West Marin, you say it's idyllic out there, but West Marin has some very serious problems going on. The communities are emptying out, and they're feeling the real dearth of the specialness of what makes their community. It's not just the beauty, it's also the people that live there. And we can't forget that we're serving the people.
Mary.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on a lot of that. So thanks for saving me some time. I live in Homestead Valley, and I spent my childhood in Section 8 housing. I lost my brother to a self-inflicted gunshot wound when I was 18 and he was 22. And I say that just so that people can understand. I have an ability to relate to people that are atypical of what is the supposed typical Marin person. So also I've had a struggle with income most of my life as an artist, trying to make an income doing art or music is a very challenging thing to accomplish. So the way I would, and also I have a nonprofit project called the Vehicle for Change, and what I would like to do to serve the people in this diverse district is have a little mobile, it's like an Airstream, and spend some time in each community throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So let me ask each of you, what do you see as the county's proper role in dealing with Marin's homeless population? And what is your position on moving Ritter Center and St. Anthony's Dining Room out of downtown San Rafael? Wendy Callens first.
Well, first of all, homelessness is not just a problem for San Rafael, even though it's most visible in San Rafael. It is a county-wide problem, and the county does need to be more engaged and involved. But there's a movement afoot to get a shelter together, and I think actually we need two, because there are people who are homeless because of circumstances, and they need a helping hand to get back on their feet. And there are people who are homeless because they're mentally ill or they have substance abuses, and they need services full time. Mm-hmm. So we need very different centers for those two populations. As far as Ritter House, you know, Ritter House doesn't just serve the homeless. It actually serves a lot more than the homeless, and it needs to be a place that's accessible for all people. And its location right now is very good. I think we need to separate Ritter House from what we have as street people who are causing serious problems in downtown San Rafael. And also, I know it because along the Mahone Pathway, you have people doing drugs right where kids are walking to school. We need to focus on the actual problem and deal with that, which I think is separate from, you know, what do you do about Ritter House?
Mary Tamburro?
Right. I would echo that. It's not fair to be blaming one particular organization for a bunch of troublemakers. It seems that in politics we always look for somebody to blame, and it automatically becomes an us versus them. What it really is, it's a community-wide challenge and something that needs to be solved by the community. So we definitely need more shelters and more services. People who are mentally ill, and that's why they're homeless, they need services. And we also need shelters, and we need to figure out what the core of the problem is and get to it at the core rather than just finding a scapegoat.
Alex Easton Brown.
Yeah, as a supervisor, I would vote to pass the Laura's Law to help the mentally ill get off the streets. Also, as citizens, we have a right to walk down the sidewalk and go to the parks and not step on broken syringes or other filth. This is our right. We pay for it. I want to get the homeless out of downtown San Rafael. I proposed using Marin Commons, which is an office building owned by the county, where the sheriff occupies half of it and half of it's empty at this time, at Lucas Valley Road. And it's isolated enough where it wouldn't bother residents or businesses, and we can deal with the homeless in a coordinated fashion. We need to bring all our services to focus on them in one place, and then we can deal with it. The city of Salt Lake City got rid of their homelessness, and interesting enough, 60% of their homeless were able to be sent home with a bus ticket after contacting their family and friends.
Well, final question. You guys really only have 30 seconds each. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. But if you're elected, Mary, we're going to start with you. Mm-hmm. What is your number one priority, your specific goal, and what's your promise to the voters that you're going to be able to effectuate it?
Okay, well, my number one goal would be to increase communication, not only to the community, to increase civic engagement,
Keep going.
but to improve communication within county departments. Because one of the things that I noticed during that whole sidewalk fiasco was that one department didn't know what the other department was doing. And I think also I would cut the consultant the consultants out of there because they'll be able to, county employees would be able to work better together.
Thank you. How about you, Alex?
Well, I'd fix the roads, and I'd stop paying these consultants millions of dollars, and I'd take care of this pension thing. But we have a slate right now of 3 people being proposed by this pension group, and they want a little bit too much power. So I'd be careful exactly who you vote for. And I see there's one person missing tonight who's not here from running for District 4, who's part of this pension group. I worked with them for 5 years very diligently, but there's a point where too much power is too much power.
Thank you. Wendy?
I really want to provide good service to our citizens. And you start by having citizens' involvement right at the very beginning, gathering the ideas, finding out what the issues are. There's a purpose of, staff is there to be the experts. Consultants also are sometimes needed when you need expertise that's not available by staff. And it's the role of the supervisor to provide the legislation and the funding and to coordinate. So I think if you get citizens involved from the very beginning and really let them know that they're heard and they're part of the process, we're going to come up with better solutions in the long run.
Great.
Our thanks to Wendy Callens, to Mary Tamburo, and to Alex Easton Brown, to the candidates who appeared on our first segment today. We hope that voters get good information from this effort to meet the candidates, and we encourage you all to vote by mail or at the polls on June 7th. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
for
for having
having
us.
us. Yeah.